everyone. Welcome to the Self Agency Advocate podcast. I'm your host, Amanda, and this is a space where we explore, discover, and share tools, techniques, and wisdom to help you build and maintain a sense of agency. All right, so as we get into this one, we're going to again start exploring that concept of acting from a place of self-agency. And it's exactly in that space of connecting to your truth, connecting to that place of honoring the internal messages, learning how to listen to them, and then acting and responding to those messages. So within this conversation today, Olly, I'm really looking to kind of dig deeper into your own insight, your own wisdom on what it means to not only connect with yourself, but why and how self-agency shows up for you. What it means to you to have this connection to yourself, why it ever kind of came onto your radar, if there was a time, a place that you thought, hey, actually, I need to start connecting further within. How does that show up in your everyday life?
Oh, wow. There's so much to unpack there, isn't there?
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting because you don't really ever think of it in those terms. Anyway, not like in the present moment, but when afterwards you can kind of look at it in those lenses. I feel like there's more to do with just slowly starting to discover. Like the first part is self-discovery, I think, because it's this idea that we are, we birth ourselves into this existence, and then we are kind of told and programmed and shifted and molded, and we mold ourselves to a certain degree, to the point where then, around, usually when you're like 18, you're like, oh, well, are all of these things really true? And then you just like go on this quest for the self, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that can be really misleading and misguiding, because you are looking for something which is a variable. Like it's not a fixed term, because like the self is something which is ever changing and always moving. And I feel like the spiritual path, or any path of anything that's kind of like geared towards discovery or probing deeper, will inevitably like lead you to play with the boundaries of self. Like firstly, it's like, okay, who am I? How do I interact with others as a human being? Am I unique? Am I alone?
Mm-hmm.
Am I made up of the experiences which shaped me, or is there a sense of this kind of I am, but then it's also I'm made up of the responses to those experiences? So you've got kind of like these two mechanisms of self-creation. You've got the external experience, and then you've got like the internal response, until eventually the point you're like, okay, well then where exactly is myself? And then it's just such a huge rabbit hole because
Right?
like it doesn't matter what
Yes.
lens you look at it, if it's like scientific or spiritual or psychological, you can't really pin it down. It's not something that you can tangibly like, yeah, this is where I begin and this is where the rest of the world begins. There is a point, because it's not. The idea is like, where do you define yourself as a self? The general consensus is kind of like, your identity. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's that identity piece that's so important, but so kind of evasive sometimes. I really love that part where you talk about exploring and kind of pushing the boundaries of yourself and seeing this place of not only creation, because we can create in any moment and it evolves and it shifts, but it's almost like you're suggesting that there's this essence of never getting too comfortable, really, because it is that rabbit hole. And it's when you discover one aspect of yourself, or when you unfold or unravel a certain layer, there's just so much more and it's never ending. So, what does your practice of self discovery look like? And with that, so I guess a two-part question there. What does your practice of self discovery look like? And do you think it's evolving and shifting in a way that you control, or is it unfolding kind of naturally behind the scenes, if that makes sense? Does one thing happen and then the other starts to unfold within that discovery as you notice things? Does your path of self-discovery shift and evolve over time with what you discover?
I think that I mean, they both feed off of each other inherently, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
how can they not? Like
Mm-hmm.
the self discovery sort of ends at a certain point, I believe, when you kind of once you break down the fact that you are completely inseparate from everything else, and
Mm.
you are it, but then you also aren't. And so like you kind of
Mhm.
have these two poles which emerge, and you've got, on the one hand, we are completely one whole total, and then on the other side we are involved in individual experience of separateness, uniqueness in ourselves, and so,
Mm.
and that's the human experience. And that's like, if the universe is an infinite thing, then we have experienced every single thing that we can. And right now what we're
Mhm.
doing is we're practicing this uniqueness, this separateness in creation. And
Mhm.
so yeah, the self. So yeah, first of all is self discovery, or maybe like self inquisition, and then the second stage is then self, like, creation and actualization. And so
Mhm.
that's when, like, you start to play, I guess, with, it's when you actually kind of discover or understand that it is possible not only to, like, find yourself, but to, like, change yourself and start modifying things, and look at, like, your behavior patterns. And, like, if you're just like you just really want to stop doing this shitty thing that you do, and you just look at that, and then
Mhm.
there's, for a long time I was just like, well, that's just who I am, that's just me, and everyone knows, oh, that's Ollie, and then there's a point when you're like, well, actually you can really be quite malleable. And if I it's kind of like, I equate it to like being on a balance beam. You got to be really focused for a long time to, like, stay, all right, I'm gonna just really
Mhm.
practice and focus, staying on this path. And then you stop needing to focus on that, because maybe the balance beam widens. I'm not sure where that metaphor goes, but it's like, yeah, like you become stable in that reality, and then it's no longer part of your being. Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm. So interesting. So in that place of self-discovery and self-actualization, when you get to that place where you're like, actually, you know what? I've uncovered the layers. Like, here I am getting into that sense of truth and really almost solidifying your foundation with respect and knowing that it's going to
Mm.
evolve and shift. Are there certain tools or certain techniques, maybe a mindset, whatever it looks like, that has really helped you stay in that foundation and stay true to yourself when it is the most challenged? So, say your boundaries are crossed, or certain aspects of your truth are being challenged, whether it's an opinion, a belief, whatever it may be. Has there been a tool, a technique, a whatever that you've been able to harness and work with when you are challenged so that you can stay connected and true to yourself?
I think that I always tend to find myself. It's more not like something that I can practice to stay in, but it's a way to get back, because it's all. I find myself
Mm.
generally kind of like flowing over to wherever that experience or emotion is. And I think that you should do
Mhm.
that, and you should just go through it. And then once that's done, then it's kind of like the tool, the practice is kind of understanding who you are. It's kind of an experience. Like, I remember it's pretty deeply rooted in, like, my experience taking psychedelics. This idea of understanding the self and understanding, where I've come from, to then, as a waypoint. And
Mhm.
then, so how that feels, right? That, what that experience is like. And so, in relation to where you're feeling right now, that's not it. There is no specific practice. It's just kind of like whittling the experiences that you are experiencing right now. It's like, well, that's not it, that's not it. And then you're just like, ah, this is it. And I guess it comes from, like,
Mhm.
there is a mental exercise. Like, I remember there was this one meditation that I did online on YouTube once, by Ram Dass, and
Mhm.
he was going through the idea of, like, having a small light emerge in the center of your chest, and then that kind of starting to emerge, and
Mhm.
uh, being of tranquility and compassion kind of emerging and looking at you, and
Mhm.
allowing that kind of light to slowly expand inside the skin self. And then as that expands out into the room, through to the planet, through to, like, the galaxy, the universe, and beyond, into undescribable
Mm.
self. And then looking from that place inwards, and but this time kind of just as that being of, like, compassion and tranquility, showing love and compassion back to all that is. which is you, and then sort of
Mm,
bringing, zooming back in again, and then so kind of like hovering over your body consciously as that self, looking at the self that
mm,
you thought you were, and then showing that self compassion and love, and then slowly allowing that to kind of come back slowly and back to its original point, into the heart. And that just always
mm,
works for me.
beautiful. There's such an essence of interconnectedness and oneness within that I think is so beautiful and potent because it is in that place of understanding that oneness, that we are that is us. That's kind of the place in which all creation occurs, and that place of compassion truly opens up. And I think, I know for myself, I find a deeper essence of empathy when I can come into that interconnectedness. So I think that's such a beautiful, beautiful point to bring to light. I'd really love to hear how, or your take on, or any insights that you may offer to those who maybe don't necessarily have a spiritual practice, to someone who maybe actually doesn't know where to start, because I think on the grander, like, global community scale, this conversation is just getting more and more prevalent of coming back to ourselves and thinking for ourselves. Like, you see our political climate, you see what's happening on a sustainability and an environmental level. But I think if we can scale it back and come back to a place of self, of my own individual actions matter, they make a
Mm,
difference. But to make that difference and make that change, I need to know what my truth is. I need to be able to come back to a connected space.
mm.
So is there something that you would offer to someone who doesn't know where to start, or maybe doesn't really grasp the spiritual side of it just yet? Is there a starting point or an offering that you
I
have?
don't think you need to. I think that some of the most enlightened, if you want to call it that, people I know have no grasp or no interaction with what we assume is spiritual. What they've just done is, if they've just gone and experienced life, and they've just been in it and gone 100%
Yeah.
into whatever they've been doing. When you're in that space and you're just experiencing, and you can take it on board, but without kind of shifting it into the mental and shifting it through like the neocortex, the analytical mind, that's where you can really reap the
Mm.
benefits of growth. And I don't think you need to be on the spiritual path at all, in quotation marks.
Yeah.
But yeah, like so, what it comes down to in the end, and you touched on it, like you said it there, was people who feel disempowered and disconnected,
Mm.
where they don't know where to start. And it's just literally understanding that you can't not be connected to everything. And we are all one, kind of, that. So, from the base layer, like the energetic layer, or the molecular layer, or the cellular layer, or the organism layer, the human layer, the cultural layer, the ecosystem layer, the planetary layer, is
Mhm.
all connected, and it just can't not be. And
Mhm.
the the interesting thing about the political climate right now, and the sustainability and everything like that you mentioned, is sort of, there's a schism in there's like a separation in the human consciousness, and it
Mm.
is distinctly, on the one side, on the one pole, there is disconnection, and on the other side there is connection, and you fit somewhere in that
Mhm.
spectrum, and you shift a lot, but like the more you connected you are in your awareness and conscious awareness, the more likely you are to create more change for the better. And those that are feeling disconnected and separate are those which, like, it's like, it goes back. My favorite moment, Tolkien fans might be ashamed of what I'm about to say because I'm going to butcher it, but like his creation myth was brilliant, because he kind of, like, it was the god, and he was like all powerful, all one, and then he sang the gods and the goddesses and into being, and then they all
Mm.
sang their own part, and the harmony and the music created, everything from the mountains, the lakes, all there was. But there was one person,
Mm.
the one god, that wanted their own song, and sang in disharmony
Mm.
with the rest of the choir, and that was responsible for all of the evil and darkness in the world. And it's like this brilliant
Hmm.
story, because it just encapsulates everything. He was disconnected and out of sync harmonically and that's what it is. And so it's not necessarily
Mm,
people are doing these things. It's just like that out of evil. It's just out of self-interest, and you are self-interested because
mhm,
you feel disconnected. And there's this idea of
mm,
if you want to be a dictator and control the world and make everybody your subjects, the first thing you do is that you disconnect people, you uneducate them, you kill off all of the musicians and the artists and people who are highly
mm,
skilled, and then you take away infrastructure. You only create like a road from your palace to the airport and back, and only things that are, you know, very
mm,
limited. And that's like, it's a brilliant strategy. So I think for
mm.
us who want the opposite of that to occur, we do the opposite. So it's literally get together, connect with as many people as possible on a human level, as much as you can in large numbers, and talk about things, communicate, create art, create music, you know,
Mm,
focus on bettering yourself in skills, and use those skills to help the people which you've been gathering with. And then like that, it's just the recipe
mm.
to do the opposite and to create change.
Wow. Yeah, I absolutely love that. I think, yeah, holy full body chills. I'm like, yes, love it. So with that, I want to unpack that. I think there's a lot to unravel there. So with that connection, with that, because you do see this massive conversation around, like we can talk about social media that's said to connect us, but can actually be used as a weapon to disconnect us and to further segregate and
Yeah,
isolate us.
totally.
So with that conversation around like meeting with like-minded people and actually communicating, like that
Mm,
physical connection, the
mm,
face-to-face connection, what would you say for those who, because within that social media and the disconnect, or however you want to look at it, we also have this rising conversation around mental health. We're seeing anxiety, depression, those isolating mental health concerns and issues on the rise. So we have more and more people actually looking to isolate and disconnect because of everything that's occurring and everything that's going
mm.
on. What would you say in that context? Like, how would we reconnect and reintegrate those kind of communities and connections and kind of invite people back into that space of community when we do have a lot of tools working against us?
That's really true about social media, because yeah, on the one hand, it does completely connect us in ways that we can never have like done before.
Mm,
But at the same time, it then
yeah.
stops us from going the next level, because I think a lot of people really underestimate. There's so many levels of communication which happens, and so what we're
Mhm,
using, you know, verbal communication for this podcast. A lot of people use like, you know,
mhm.
textual communication on social media, but then the far more impactful
Yeah.
is like the chemical, the bioelectrical, the social, the more
Mhm,
primal versions, and that just comes from people being in the same room together. And it's a lot. It's something that computer scientists, I don't think, really
mhm.
fully understand yet, is how powerful that is.
Yeah.
And so I don't think it's that complicated. I think it's just, first of all, you can get a lot of people together, but if they're still not, I guess, authentic to themselves and honest
Mhm,
to others, then you're going to have a rough time. So I guess you got to start there.
mhm.
How do you do that? I think you just drop the stories in yourself. You just
Mm,
let go of what you think people should, how you think you should behave based on people's perspective or your perceived perspective. Drop your own story,
mm,
you know, and you just like stop the stories, stop the mental chatter. And then if you can kind of just remember who you are, you know it, because, you know, you've been like, particularly I think for me, it's like when I tap back into who I was as a, you know, as a child, as a kid, that was kind of some of my most
mm,
authentic moments, because there wasn't those stories. So then you just like kind of tap into
mhm,
that and then authentically relate to other people. That's the best thing
mhm.
that the world needs right now.
Yeah, that authentic connection, hey? Man, if we could just get everyone into that space, because it is that chemical reaction. It is that frequency that you want to get on, and it's within that space of whether it's movement, whether it's yoga, whether it's simply being around
Mm,
others. I think there's such a profound effect. And I really do like I would love to hear what it is, because I think the moments that I have witnessed you as your most authentic, when I think of Ollie and I think of the most authentic space, it's
yeah.
ecstatic dance. It's witnessing the atmosphere, but the permission for every single person in there to be their most authentic, raw, vulnerable,
Mm.
primal being. What does that feel like for you? Like, I can't even, I know I experience it in my own way when I'm facilitating certain things, but what does that feel like for you to be in that space facilitating something like that?
It's beautiful. It's amazing. It's very empowering. It's, I guess, like the only way to really do that is to yeah, exactly that. Like you can't be in your head and you can't be thinking about it, and you have to drop into,
Mhm.
well, yourself, but then yourself as a collective, as the room energy, right?
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
yeah, and then so it almost shifts from being a individual experience, although it's kind of, yeah, it does can't go in and out of like the individual to the group. But as
Mm.
as it moves on through the process of ecstatic dance, it kind of starts to elevate and sink more into the group consciousness, and
Mhm.
I guess that's where the magic happens, and that's where like I've seen it not only in ecstatic dance, but at festivals and times when people are really
Mhm.
connected into themselves. They end up connecting into everybody else by default, and so people end up just becoming this
Mhm.
kind of hive of bees or ants, and they just kind of they work together
Yeah.
simultaneously, and whether or not the bee is actually really conscious that he's like flying super close to the other one but not missing and all that kind of stuff, I'm not sure, but it's kind of like this
Mhm.
idea of like when an organism turns into a super organism, like this collective. Yeah, it's so hard to explain. I don't think it is something that you can, maybe someone could, but I don't think it is something that you can intellectually kind of break down and here's the secrets to it, rather than just dropping everything else which isn't that, because
Yeah.
that's who we are at our core of our being, and everything else on top is
Mm.
these kind of shells and layers and protection barriers and like
Mhm.
castle walls and stuff which we put around ourselves, and that's what's
Yeah.
stopping this connection that we're talking about.
Yeah. And I think it's really beautiful to be able to articulate that experience in the way that you just did, because I didn't know how you were possibly going to answer that, because how do you verbalize something that is so felt sense, so somatic? But to hear you verbally express this way in which we can coexist and co create simultaneously, connecting with others and so deeply connecting with ourselves in a space like that, I think is really profound, because it kind of illuminates and shines light once again on that concept of when the layers are stripped away, when nothing is left, when you are your most open, your most connected and grounded. It's exactly what you said. That's when the magic happens. That's when that deep connection can
Mm.
unfold. So I think that is really powerful to hear that expressed.
Yeah, like that is
Yep.
basically the essence of it. Is it's not really about adding anything, but in stripping away, and that's my experience with ecstatic dance,
Mm.
particularly. But also, I think like from the moment that I kind of realized that there might be something else. Something other to discover than like the regular world. I don't know if you want to call it that. It's always
Mhm.
been a matter of taking away these layers to reveal deeper truths. And the same thing with the self. It's like, the first time you go to ecstatic dance, it's there's so many layers there that you've got, which, and particularly for
Mm.
us, particularly in
Yeah.
Western culture, our attitude towards dance itself, so there's like all of that. There's like, first of all, it's like, am I a person that can go to ecstatic dance? What are people from the outside of that going to think of me? And then you go through and then you're
Mhm.
inside and it's like, oh my God, I'm in a room of people dancing. What are they thinking? And then
Yeah.
then there's like the layer within you of just like, okay, well, what do I think of me? And then underneath that, like once you kind of get through all of that, and then it's like, okay, well, am I actually really dancing for myself? Or am
Hmm.
I dancing for others? Am I trying to pull pretty shapes or, do these certain things? Or am I just expressing,
Yeah.
what is happening at that moment?
Yeah, there's so much within that in itself, because if I think to my first experience with ecstatic dance, I was
Yeah.
terrified. The concept of it, I was like,
Yeah.
absolutely not. Like, what do you mean there's no alcohol? What do you mean there's no atmosphere? in that regard. Like there was so many things going through my head. I'm like, I don't know how to dance. I can't dance. I like there was so many questions and barriers, and the confronting nature of hearing what ecstatic dance is and then being about to step into it. I can't even fathom how it sounds to others, because like for some people they hear ecstatic dance and they're like,
Yeah.
absolutely not, can't move my body. I can't do that. I would be in my head the whole time, this and that, because it brings up a lot of stuff. It brings up so much of your insecurities, of your inner demons that you're working with and through, and the truths that you don't
Mm.
necessarily want to hear. Because when you move your body, if you think of the somatic way in which you move, our tissues actually store, that cellular memory stores everything. It stores our emotions, our thoughts, physical things that have happened to us, traumas, stressors. So when you move your body, there's so much potential for a release, an emotional flooding. There's so many factors to consider. Yet, when I was in that scene and in that experience, it's the most cathartic, therapeutic, and meaningful experience to be able to shed all of that and let it go and still acknowledge it and know that it's there, it's a part of you. But it's such a profound, profound experience. So, if you were going to explain to someone who has never heard of or understands what ecstatic dance is, how would you explain it?
I would explain it as like the essentially the most primal version of movement that you can experience. You know,
Mm.
there's pretty good evidence that music and dance has been with us since the beginning of humanity, and you know,
Mhm.
some believe actually before. And it's
Mhm.
this, you know, up until literate cultures emerged, it was the primary form of communication, and you know, it's like the original hard drive of information. It stored cultural
Mhm.
norms and you know, where things were, and so it has information is encoded through movement, and you
Mhm.
express through expressing that you are expressing these deeper truths, and it's hilarious,
Mm.
particularly to us who grew up in this culture, to think that, you know, oh, we're just dancing, you know, and you are, you know, you know,
Mhm.
on one level it's just fun, but then on another level you are
Mhm.
doing these things, and you are, you know, you do go through these huge emotional breakthroughs that you can get to through like psychology and like different paths and meditation. But for me personally, it has been the most impactful experience
Mm.
because it doesn't go through the logical pathways of the brain. You know, it bypasses all of that, so then it can tap in
Mm.
straight to the core, into the emotions, and that's what music does very well. And then
Mhm.
dance is kind of like the human response to music in a way. And so
Mm.
I'm not sure if you've seen cymatics, you know, this resonant experiment where he puts this vibration, and then sand moves in different geometric patterns based on. And when I
Yes.
first saw that, I was like,
Yes.
so that is essentially what dance is. Its sound comes through the
Mm.
body, and then it translates geometric forms out in through dance movements. You know, and we are like, it's this relationship,
Yeah.
and that's why it can be so powerful and shifting, among other things.
Mm.
But that's, I guess that's not really a nutshell, but that's that's what I'd explain it.
Oh, but it's a beautiful, yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a transformational experience no matter the duration of it. I have found, because I'll be the first to admit it was the last thing that I ever
Mm.
thought I would do. But after experiencing it once and then twice and then a couple more times, I was like, "Oh, there's something to this." And I think it is that idea of, it doesn't matter the tool. It doesn't matter what it is that you connect with. And it might be you connect with something for a month and then you shift and use a different modality or tool or technique. But when something
Mm.
resonates, it's for a reason. And I think if we can get to a place where we feel that connection and we dive into it and we take what we can from it. Doesn't matter how long it lasts. If it's with you forever, amazing. If it's with you for a year or a week, whatever it is. but the tools and the unraveling that occurs within that space is so, so
Yeah, and if I
beautiful.
can distill what you like a question that you asked earlier about what could somebody do
Mm,
who wasn't on this like spiritual path, it would literally be finding the edge, right? Finding your edge of comfort, because it doesn't matter what you're doing if
yeah.
you're on your the edge of your comfortability, it's going to create
Mhm.
huge ripples and shifts in the body and in the self and
Yes.
everything and people around you, and that is where it all is. So like the more, and you're going to, and that's an elastic band, because it does, it kind of moves out and then kind of comes back, but not quite as far every time, and you're going to
Mm.
keep moving it out, and you'll become like certain things that you're comfortable with now you would never were comfortable before, and so then your job is to kind of find the next
Mhm.
bit. Yeah.
Love that. Yes. That edge is so powerful. So, so powerful. So I have one more question for you that's kind of it's my favorite question. This is the place where I want to get to know a little bit more about that truth within, because one of the reasons that I'm doing this podcast is to really explore this concept of when we connect to our truest, most vulnerable and real self, when we're in that space of centeredness, there's a healing that occurs. There's a transformation that happens, and we start to live authentically. We start to speak our truth. And I think when we're in that space, we have the capacity to make change and to make big, big shifts in this world. So, is there a big change that you would like to make on, even thinking on like within the global community, or is there a norm, a societal norm that you would like to disrupt? And what would it be and why?
Okay. It's a big one.
It's a big
Juicy.
one.
Juicy question. So the big, I mean, I believe the biggest change is to do with creating our connection. I feel like the worlds will change. I think it's a law that the more we do connect with each other and the planet
Mhm,
and ourselves, like the more layers of connection that we have, the more that we are going to empathetically be able to react and respond to the dangers which are inherent in the planet, but also the dangers which are inherent in the dominator culture that exists today, that
mm,
wish to control like every kind of society, consciously or unconsciously. And so I think like what
mhm,
I would say is to raise awareness of the two polarities of like the people who seek partnership with each other and the planet, and those which seek to dominate them and extract, because that to me seems to
mm,
be the this fundamental essence of a the problems in the world and b the solutions. So like it doesn't matter what aspect or problem that you're talking about, it can be explained through either the lens of domination or partnership. And so it's kind of
mhm,
understanding is like, okay, where am I right now? Am I seeking to control this situation, or am I seeking to be symbiotic with it? And then moving that out into the community is like, am I, is there anything in this community that is seeking to control it externally, or are we seeking partnership? I'm not sure if I'm explaining this right, but it's
mhm,
it would be to raise awareness for that and acting of a
mhm,
place of connection as much as you can, because when people are
mhm,
doing that en
mhm,
masse, it's an exponential. And so like, and it's already happening. It's not
mhm,
something that is a brand new idea, but it's like accelerating that, because what I feel, as I've been talking to a lot of people this week about it, is that so I don't believe that people who are really, who are, destroying the earth or destroying the nature on the earth are doing it that consciously, but they
mhm,
have kind of launched like a blitzkrieg offensive onto the planet, and they've really ramped up their
mhm,
actions massively. And what we need on the side of people who do feel like they are connected and do feel that as an appalling thing to do, to take action and to really
mhm,
internalize this truth and respond with this action and this kind of warrior spirit. Because what's happened
mm,
with our generation particularly is we've kind of grown up disempowered to make change, and we've kind of believed in this
mhm,
rhetoric that oh well, the powers that be will thwart any kind of like anything that we throw at it, so there's no point even trying. And so then that is a self-fulfilling prophecy, because
mhm,
then you don't do anything, and then the system gets worse, and then that
yes,
furthers your belief and distrust in the system. But really, when you look at any kind of change that's ever happened, it's been because people believed that they could do so, united, and created a force, and delegated responsibilities, and some people are
Mhm.
really good at connecting, some people are really good at innovating, but just getting together under a single cause, believing that you can make a change, and being connected is the
Mhm.
huge thing.
Absolutely. And I think that's such a powerful way that it just kind of came full circle. It really just looped back in on itself, and that concept of when we do feel empowered within ourselves and we're living that embodied experience, that ripple effect of connection starts to manifest in a way that we are impacting and affecting everything else around us, and it's getting in touch with that truth. I know for myself personally, when I see what's happening in politics, in religion, in environmental sustainability, women's rights, LGBTQ equality, all of it, like the inner activist in me just
Yeah.
like ramps up, and I'm like, I need to change the world. And I get so worked up about it. And I think it can be so easy to feel defeated. For myself, I'm like, what can I do? Like, how are we going to make this shift? What are we doing? How are we going to swing this pendulum back into a place of balance? And I think it's really powerful that you reiterated that idea around do
Mm,
what you can do. Come from that place of this is what I
mm,
have the capacity for. These are my strengths. This is what I've got.
mm,
This is what I believe in. And let's go from there. And then that ripple
mm.
effect will
Yeah.
go. I think that's so, so
Yeah,
beautiful.
100%. Yeah, it is. I'm the same. I feel exactly the same right now. Like this real fiery
Yeah.
spirit, like arcing up. But that's what it needs.
Yeah.
That's what our planet is calling us to do. And one thing that's really come clear is like literally so many, like millions of people, like literally lived and died to protect the land and protect the planet from people who wanted to
Mhm.
clear fell it and burn it down, or those who wanted to oppress them, oppress their
Yep.
freedom, and they just went and lived and died and fought for it. And then we kind of have
Mhm.
this torch, that's been handed to us, and we're, more or less, it kind of feels like, meh, I can't really be bothered with all
Mm.
of that stuff, and it's such a waste.
Yeah.
It's such a like. It's the biggest waste of all time, and it just can't happen. Hey.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So is there something on your radar as of lately that's kind of, so if you've got this warrior spirit and you're in it and you're like, "Okay, I've got this torch. What am I gonna do with it?" Is there something on your radar right now, something that you're actively involved in or in the process of getting involved in that you feel is making that change you wanna see? Have you seen anything or creating something?
I would love to say yes. I'd love to have that thing that like I'm like, yeah, that this is it. I don't.
Mm.
I think that by doing that, like from staying in this place, and trying to connect as much as possible, that it does have an effect which is non-quantifiable. It has this kind of real ripple effect. uh, but then, yeah, you're right. Like
Mhm.
there's this next stage which needs to happen. And I think it is a combination. It's going to have to be, a combination of, first of all, explaining and raising awareness of this situation. That's
Yeah.
one. And then the second is like combining all of the fronts. So like the people who are into like sustainability, to the people who are innovating new technologies to try and guide away from using technologies which suck a lot of resources, and everything in between.
Mhm.
But no,
Mhm.
I don't have a plan yet. Yeah.
It'll happen. It'll happen. Thank you so, so much for this time. That insight, that wisdom that you've brought to the table, speaking from that place of experience and your own capacity and domain is so, so valued and so appreciated, because this is that thing, it's having conversations like this, it's bringing awareness and educating, it's sharing experience and telling people what is going on, and like allowing them to actually find that place of making informed decisions for themselves. So this time definitely doesn't go unnoticed, and I so, so greatly appreciate you taking that time out and spending it with
Wow,
me.
thank you so much. Yeah, the feeling is mutual. I really honor what you do, and I'm really pleased that you're raising these points and these really amazing questions. And yeah, I wish you all the best with that.
Thank thank you so much for listening. And if there's anything at all that you want to explore or you have ideas about and want to get into, please drop me a line. You can find us at The Self Agency Advocate on both Facebook and Instagram. And I would absolutely love to chat, so let's connect.